My name's Angela Tobin, and this presentation is about self care. So, self care means something different to everyone, but to me, really, self care is a journey back to yourself and feeding that part of who you are as a person and as a human. So, I'm really excited for you all to be here, and you'll get to know a little bit about me soon. But this presentation is one of Kinship Caregivers Connect's presentations in partnership with Ohio Can, which is Ohio Kinship and Adoption Navigators Program. So we really thank them for their support in bringing this information to kinship families. A little bit about me. So, my degree is actually in occupational therapy. I graduated Ohio State in 2022 with a doctorate, and it's been really cool to bring that holistic health background into helping to support caregivers. We talk a lot about self care and occupational therapy, whether that's like helping people who've had a stroke be able to do things for themselves again or adapting the environment to help them. But I think it can also extend to building in self care for yourselves as caregivers, for your own health, for your own mental well being. So I'm really excited to have that background. And I do also have background in research around kinship family well being. We will talk about some research statistics in this presentation, only just to give a general overview of what is out there and what's been found, but knowing that experience is really the greatest tool. And then I'm also the leader of Kinship Caregivers Connect, which I've been leading for the past 4 years now, since June of 2024. And it's been my greatest honor, especially meeting so many caregivers every day. And to really have built a true community, even online, has been so special. And I'm just excited to be able to be here with you, but also hopefully get to know you as well if you do attend one of our support groups. Beyond just my professional experience, I also do have a why that's very personal, and this is seeing kinship care within my own family. So, although I cannot say I've been a caregiver myself, and you all are the experts of parenting, caregiving, living this every day, I do have a why for why I knew what kinship care was and why I started Kinship Caregivers Connect in the first place. And this was my own grandparents. So, my grandparents cared for my cousin for around 8 years when he was growing up. And I just saw the joy and fulfillment that it brought them, but also the challenges, especially as they got older. And unfortunately, they did have health issues, and my grandma had cancer. So I was trying, it was hard for me to see them in that way, but really up until the very end, caring for my cousin gave them so much purpose. And after my grandparents passed away, unfortunately, my parents stepped in to care for him for a couple of years. And you could see the whole family here. So he's my cousin, but really he's my brother, and I'm so honored to be a part of his village. And like I said, I really just started this group for my own family, and it's cool to see just how common kinship care is. So I just want to say I see you and I hear you, and I'm so honored to be able to do this work and kind of remember my grandparents in this journey as well. All right. Well, before we get started with the presentation content, I do want to start with an affirmation. And this is just an opportunity to check in with yourself and for us to really take a moment to take a deep breath together. But I really love the message of this affirmation because it talks about healing and growth. And so much of that is found in kinship care and also in self care as well. So we're going to read this through, and I just want to let it sink in for a moment. As I create space for the things that heal my heart, I also make space for love to grow in meaningful ways. As I create space for the things that heal my heart, I also make space for love to grow in meaningful ways. So I love both of these things. And there's so much growing, so many seeds that you've sown as a kinship caregiver. Sometimes it takes time to see it bloom and to see the fruits of it, but it's just so cool to see on the journey. And again, I hope today will inspire love and healing. A big part of this presentation is I don't want it to be me talking all the time because, first of all, that's not fun for everyone. And second, I think the more that you can think about this and apply it to yourself, the more you'll get out of this. So, we'll have some reflection questions. When we do the training live, we have time for discussions. We won't have that same level of discussion here, but I do encourage, if you have a journal or just a quiet moment where you can reflect on these things, I think it will really help to get more out of this presentation. So the first question to think about is, what does self-care mean to you? So we'll think about this question at the beginning of the presentation, and then we'll think about it again at the end and see if there's any additions or changes to self care. So, again, the question is, what does self care mean to you? And when we asked this question in the group, we got responses like doing things for yourself, doing things that bring you joy. We also had like taking care of yourself so you can take care of other people. So, thinking again what that means to you. All right. Well, here's our roadmap for today. We'll talk about a lot of different things, but they all do tie together. So, we'll first start off talking about caregiver well being, especially well being for kinship caregivers, and how you all bring so many strengths in caring for the kids that you are caring for. And also, when I say kids, I mean adolescents and teenagers as well. But that big transition in stepping into the role of a caregiver and how that can take a toll on your well being. We'll then talk about self compassion and self care. So, this will include tips for creating your own space, the importance of rediscovering yourself in your role as a caregiver, building your village and leaning on others. And then we'll talk about some really concrete self care strategies. And I hope by the end of this, we'll have some goals written out and some things written down where you have something new to try, or you just feel encouraged that you're already doing self care and you want to continue on with doing that. So we'll start off with this reflection question. And I want you to think about this question as we go through the next couple of slides. If there's examples that resonate with you, or just what your own experience has been in stepping to the role of a caregiver. I know for some of you, it's been a long time since you stepped into the role of a kinship caregiver, and for others, it's very new. So just try your best to remember, no matter where you are on the journey, and even how these changes continue to impact you as a caregiver. So, the question to think about is, how has stepping into the role of a kinship caregiver affected your well being? How has it affected your life in general? So, this exercise is an invitation. You don't have to do it. I know sometimes thinking back to different times can be difficult, but I think part of this, we mentioned self compassion in that presentation. So, I think part of this is just meeting yourself where you are and really taking time to process what your experience is. So, again, this is an invitation, but this specifically part is about thinking about your life and routine before stepping into the role of a caregiver. So, if you can go back before you were a kinship caregiver. We have yourself in the middle of this circle, and these are some different parts of your life. So, your family life, such as maybe you're able to enjoy being the grandparent that spoiled a child and gave them back at the end of the day, having that role. What your career and retirement was. Some people were in the peak of their careers, some people were planning to retire and have this part of their lives to themselves. If you had time for leisure and hobby activities, what these leisure and hobby activities were, what your other caregiver roles were. Maybe you're able to just be a babysitter, or maybe you had other family members to care for as well. And then finally, thinking about your own well being. Before becoming a caregiver, how did you feel? What was your well being like? I know one caregiver in our group gave the example of her and her husband after work, they're able to go to the movies together. They didn't have anything else to worry about, and they could just have that time together and make plans in the evenings. So think about this for a minute. And again, you could write it down if you'd like. So now I want you to think about after you became a caregiver, what can change? And you see how we have the U circle really big here, and then it gets small. This is just to show that becoming a kinship caregiver can be very overwhelming, and there could be so much change at once. So sometimes you feel like you might start to shrink in the process or with all the things around you. So these are some ways that becoming a kinship caregiver can change things. And again, think about this for yourself. But we have that big life transition. I mean, taking in a child, that's 24/7 plus job. So transitioning from maybe just being on your own schedule to literally being on the schedule of a child or adolescent and planning your day, finances, life around them. So I want to leave space to recognize that life transition And a lot of times when caregivers say yes, it happens so quickly, you might not even realize it, or just being on survival mode, trying to make it through. But I think processing all that has changed is really important. So we have the legal process. You might have not expected to have to, have contact with child protective services or even bring a family member to court, or all of the legal jargon and language, knowing what your options are. So navigating that legal process. We have your own child's well-being. So this means like getting all of the supports in place that they need, and also taking in a child that has experienced trauma. You might need to learn to parent differently because, trauma can affect children in so many ways, including their behaviors and their attachment to you. So navigating that. And along with that, getting the supports in place they need, such as navigating the education system. Maybe they need an IEP. That can be very overwhelming. The financial aspect, I'm sure you didn't plan financially to take in another child. We know things are so expensive, especially now with inflation. And that can be a huge part. And it's really unfortunate because there are not a lot of financial supports in place for caregivers. The birth parent involvement and navigating your own relationship with the birth parent can be challenging, and sometimes it can be positive, but other times it can be really hard, and not having those supports in place to navigate that relationship. The change in family dynamics. Some family members may support you, some may not, and navigating what everyone's opinions and advice are, even though you are the ones providing care every day. And then with all of this, sometimes your own well being gets left on the back burner, caring for yourself and doing the things that fill your own cup. So that's why today we'll focus on this circle. I know it might be a little circle in here, but I hope it can continue to grow, and caring for yourself can become a priority in your life in order to keep doing all of these other things as well. Some examples of how things changed when we did this presentation as a group included, even the change in the relationship between the caregiver and their partner, and how sometimes their partner didn't feel like they really signed up for this when things got challenging, and how that was a sacrifice in a way, to the whole family taking in a child. We also heard changing even in job pathways. So one caregiver was working, but she wasn't making enough to cover daycare or childcare. So she actually had to quit her job and stay home with the kids. So that changed her whole life and identity. So there's so many different examples, and I hope you just know in these changes you're not alone. And not only what the changes are, but there's a lot of different feelings that can come up. There can be feelings of resentment or guilt or shame, and maybe even just resentment towards the situation, not necessarily the child or anyone else involved. But I think it's important to recognize the feelings as well that come along with these changes. And there can be both positive and negative together. So joy and fulfillment and gratitude, and being so glad that you taking in the child prevented them from entering foster care. So we'll talk about feelings later on, but part of this exercise is just taking a moment to sit with yourself and realizing all that has changed and all that you have been through. So we are going to start off with some slightly depressing news, but we will end with some great news. So I do think this is important to be aware of, just to hopefully validate what your experience has been as a caregiver. And like I said, research is really helpful because it lets us know what the trend is and what can be going on with a specific population. But your story is your truth and your experience. So it may not apply exactly to what your experience is. But what does research does tell us is kinship caregivers experience higher stress and a caregiver burden in their everyday life. So this makes sense because of all the changes we just talked about. They can a lot of times be very stressful. So reasons that caregivers can experience increased stress include more responsibility with caregiving. As I said, it's more than a 24/7 job. Managing child challenging behaviors that can especially be related to the trauma that a child's experienced. Navigating so many different systems at once, often with little support, and having to call numbers without people answering, and just making it really difficult to get the things in place that the child needs. Managing different family dynamics. This is something that makes kinship care very unique, because you do have that relationship with the birth parent a lot of times prior to taking in the child, and also other relatives too. And finally, that lack of financial support, which is such an important topic to advocate for, but that can be a huge stress to families, especially when you're trying to meet your basic needs. It's hard to think about anything else besides doing what you need to really survive and keep a roof over your head. So we do have some more research findings here, and this links the stress that we just described with other things for yourself as a caregiver. So what does increased stress, what can it cause? It can cause depression for caregivers. It could cause changes in disciplinary practices. So if you're more stressed, you might have harsher disciplinary practices or a shorter temper with the kids. It can cause caregiver burnout, and we'll talk a little bit about burnout soon, but this can really impact your ability to keep going as a caregiver and keep a child in your home. And I know everyone here wants what's best for their child, but it's just important to know the impact that stress can have for you as a caregiver and how it doesn't just affect yourself, but it can affect the entire family. And that is why self care is so important. And that is why it's never selfish either. I do want to talk a bit about burnout because I think it's important to learn what your signs are, even like yellow flags before you're in a complete state of burnout. But burnout is a state of long term stress that can lead to exhaustion. And another phrase that can describe burnout is running on empty. And I know it's a word that's commonly used like in the workplace, but definitely caregivers can experience burnout too with all of the responsibilities and changes that come your way. So, burnout reduces our capacity to care for ourselves and others. And it doesn't only affect us mentally, but there could also be physical and emotional signs of burnout too. And actually, a caregiver in our group talked about how when she went to the doctor, that she actually had changes in some of her lab reports that indicated during stressful times there's physical changes and effects that she experiences. So it doesn't just show up for us mentally, but in all ways. So we'll go over some different symptoms. And like I said, this isn't diagnosing or anything like that, but these are just some things that can be an indicator of stress and burnout. So feelings of anxiety and fear, feelings of anger, frustration, and irritation more than normal, feelings of denial of what the situation is or even guilt about the situation, feeling very negative. And I think one that's really important is feeling alone and isolated and kind of losing that desire to be around other people. Physical symptoms can include fatigue and exhaustion, loss of appetite or changes in weight, changes in sleep, whether that's not sleeping enough or sleeping too much, getting more sick than often, and then kind of losing your ability to pay attention to things. And this goes along with the social and cognitive and emotional signs that can show up. So, loss of attention and concentration, feelings of isolation from friends and family, loss of interest in activities previously enjoyed, and increases in frustration and irritability. Finally, and feeling hopeless and helpless. So, some of these can mirror signs of depression and signs of anxiety as well. But I think some signs can be more subtle of stress. So, we had a presenter last, I think, 6 months ago, and she said one of her signs that she's getting stressed is craving sugar and ice cream. So, that might not be as severe as these things, but just knowing what how our body is telling us is stress so we can learn those signs and know when to implement self-care, hopefully before reaching full burnout. But if you are experiencing burnout, that's okay. That can be normal, and just knowing that there is help and ways to get better. So now I want to give you an opportunity to think about, how does your body tell you that you're experiencing stress and burnout? So think about those signs for yourself. You can write them down too if you like. And I do want to note that stress is normal. It's a normal reaction when there are things around us that we need to attend to. If we think about it biologically, like happened to us because if there is a tiger in front of us, we had to decide how to handle that situation. So short term stress can be normal, and stress sometimes can even be good in situations. There is such thing as a good stress, but stress affecting us long term, our body's not meant to be in that fight or flight state for long periods of time or even survival mode. So these are times where stress can lead to burnout because it's just constant for us, and it can actually have changes to our brain and how our brain functions and reacts as well. So now we get to the good news. The good news is there is hope and there's things that can help us to reduce the impact of stress on our lives and maybe even reduce our stress in general. So these are called protective factors. And some protective factors, this is research within kinship care specifically, but there is obviously ones that apply to everyone outside of kinship care too. But specifically for caregivers, self care and resiliency practices can really help reduce the impact of stress and lead to better caregiver well being. So, we'll focus on self care and resiliency today. Other factors that can help include support from friends, families, and peers. So that's all about building your village because everyone needs a village. And also support from professionals and different systems. So professionals such as counselors or family mediators. And systems just mean that also like the systems need to change in order to better support caregivers too. So this is looking at it from different levels, but today we'll focus on self-care specifically. So I know we've talked a lot about caregiver well-being before even getting to self-care, but this is to establish like why self-care is important, especially for you as a caregiver. Self care doesn't only impact your own well being, but it also impacts your child and your family's well being too. And I think part of self care is really just embracing what it means to be human. Being human means we're not perfect. Being human means we have needs that have to be met and have like limitations. So everyone needs sleep, everyone needs to eat, everyone needs to take care of their physical health. So part of self care, that's why it isn't selfish also because we have to do it in order to keep going as human beings and also to give the best version of ourselves to others as much as possible. So it goes along with some common sayings of Dr. Crumley says, you must be okay in order for the child in your care to be okay. And then we've also heard the saying, put an oxygen on on yourself before you can put it on someone else. And finally, even the safety net needs a strong support. I think you all are such great people for being that safety net for your family. But as a safety net, there has to be something that holds you up too. So these are all common sayings. And obviously, everything is easier in theory than practice. And I can say that for myself too. But just remembering when we're thinking like self-care, oh, I don't have time for this, or I don't even want to do this, like why it is important. Dr. Crumbly has a curriculum about the strengths of kinship care and kinship families. And one of the topics is healing and how kinship care can be a healing process, not only for the child that you're caring for, but for the whole family, including yourself. So I just want to challenge you as you think about healing the children in your care. How can you grow and heal in the process? And that goes back to that affirmation we started with. We'll watch a video by Morgan Harper Nichols. I love this video because it talks about just how different feelings can occur at once. And I think it might resonate with people. So as you're watching this, just take this as an opportunity to check in with yourself.
When it feels like everything is changing all at once, remember this. Here in this life, you will feel many things. You will laugh and you will let go. You will gather stories and you will grieve. You will be interrupted by light. You will find gold in the little things. You will have questions that lead to answers, and you will have questions you sit with for years. You will long for days to come, and you will learn to find joy right here. You will watch old things drift away, and you will see new things take shape. You will look back on these years in awe of all the ways you've changed. And over, things will change, and you might feel a little afraid. And you will also find there is grace and there is space to take this day by day. Everything will change, and you will change too, exactly in the way you were always meant to.
So now we'll actually get into some strategies. One thing that I've learned, and this was actually found in a research study, is self-care, especially for kinship caregivers, it has to start with self-compassion. It can't just start with a checklist of strategies and things to do, because there's no why behind that. And also, before you can take care of yourself and know what you need and want, you need to meet yourself first, to see where you are, to see how you're feeling, and then what you can do. So, self compassion is technically defined as treating yourself with warmth and understanding in difficult times, and recognizing that making mistakes is part of being human. We just talked about that human side. But really, how I see it is seeing yourself where you are and embracing yourself where you are. So, I love this picture. And I know so many times when life is rushing through us, we don't have time to stop and check in. So, this is an invitation to do that. So, this is one example of a way to check in with yourself. We actually do this wheel almost every support group meeting, because I think just having that space to think about how you're doing, and I love how it ties in colors. So, you can just name a few colors that you're feeling, is really helpful. So, you can like print this off, put it somewhere you can see it, maybe on your mirror or your fridge, just as a reminder to check in with yourself. So, here are the different feelings, and you can think about how you're feeling as I go through these. Yellow is light, energetic, and happy. Green is hopeful, inspired. Beige is content. Blue, worried, nervous, preoccupied. Purple, curious, eager to learn. Pink is relaxed and satisfied. Gray is tired and overstretched. White is sad. Red, angry, about to blow, totally stressed. Orange, annoyed, frustrated, irritated. So think about how you're feeling today, this week. It can be the rainbow sometimes. Today I'm feeling relaxed and satisfied. But earlier this week, if you asked me, I was probably more blue. So think about those colors. And this is a simple way we can check in with yourself, or you can create your own if there's not a color on here that describes how you're feeling. So this is an example. There's other examples of ways to check in yourself, and these don't have to be big. Like, checking in with yourself can be a form of self-care that doesn't take a lot of time, but it can be helpful to build into our schedule. And I love this quote. It says, "There's a voice that doesn't use words. Listen." So these are just ways that we can listen to ourselves. Embracing a quiet moment. This can be like waking up to silence and then taking a deep breath and just embracing that. There's also a poem we went over as a group. It's called "Looking Where the Light Pours In." So if there's light coming in the window, just taking a moment to look and feel the light. Sometimes when I do this, I fall back asleep in the morning, so I try to not have too many quiet moments before getting up. But this can also look like taking a deep breath. We'll do a guided meditation about just staying in touch with your breath. So sometimes just grounding yourself. Taking a moment to check in with yourself when you look in the mirror. There's times where going into the bathroom, getting ready in the morning. For me, having that visual to like look at myself, look at my eyes, kind of look into my soul and say, okay, how am I doing today? Having that visual can be helpful. Even just thinking about how you're feeling, like the colors wheel. Like, a lot of times, if we're not processing our feelings and just go, 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 the feelings, we think they're going away or we're ignoring them, but really we're pushing them down and they'll come up another way. So taking that time to reflect. And if it feels really scary to think about your feelings and you're like, I do not want to go there, I need help with this, that's a time where reaching out to a therapist or a mental health professional can also be helpful. Journaling, there's plenty of journaling prompts, or you can do it diary style. Dear diary, this is how I'm doing today. Mindfulness, this can be, again, not very time consuming, in a way just to come in touch with ourselves. And then I also mentioned therapy and counseling as a way to check in with ourselves. And I think therapy can be helpful to everyone if you have access to it. These are things we've talked about throughout the presentation, but I did want to create a reminder slide because I think they're very important. So they say being a kinship caregiver comes with many different feelings. It's okay and normal to experience a wide range of emotions. Ignoring or pushing down feelings does not make them go away. Creating a safe space to reflect can help us understand our feelings and what they are telling us. So, this is all about creating that safe space for ourselves, no matter how much time or little time, just having it there. Listening our feelings doesn't give them power over us. Rather, it gives us the opportunity to get to know ourselves more and the power to find a way forward. So, going on with all of those different strategies we talked about, I want you to think about specifically your life, your days, your routine. How can you create a safe space or moment for yourself? So maybe just identify one time in your day where you can create that safe space to check in with yourself. Mine is normally my morning coffee, but it's different for everyone. Mindfulness was shared as one of the ways we can check in with ourselves, and it can help us connect to the present moment without judgment or reaction. So, there's a lot of different ways to do this. I know some people think of meditation, and that can be a great way. However, that doesn't work for everyone. There are some apps, such as the Breathe app and others, so many free resources as well, such as Headspace, that provide guided meditation from short ones to long ones. So, that can be something that you try and see. I know it does help like slow my heart rate down, kind of check in with my body. But Beth Tyson did share that there are other things for trauma informed mindfulness that can make it more comfortable for people if just the breath work meditation isn't a good fit. So, another example is choosing a point of focus to sustain attention. So, this can be just looking out the window, listening to the sounds of the birds. It could also be while you're eating. They have like mindful eating. So, really paying attention to the taste and texture of the food. And there's also movement. So, yoga can be an example of mindfulness. There's also tons of free yoga videos and resources. And this is something that you can do on your own or with your little ones too. And some of those tips for trauma informed mindfulness, just because sometimes when we pay attention to our body, it can bring up some of those feelings or experiences of trauma that maybe we've been storing in different ways. So, some trauma informed tips include giving yourself permission to stop at any time. If closing your eyes is difficult and it feels like out of control or triggering to you, you can just remember to keep your eyes open. Again, you can do that sustained attention mindfulness. You don't need to necessarily focus on your breath, and also just moving your body and having that sense of being in your body. Movement can be a great tool of mindfulness. So just to say, sometimes it's sitting down and meditating, but there's also other options for mindfulness as well, and it's important to find what works best for you. Some benefits of mindfulness include improving your attention and focus. And we did say one of the signs of burnout could be like losing your attention. So, mindfulness can help to counteract this. It can decrease stress, improve your own self awareness, and also improve your self regulation. Just being in touch with your body and having some strategies for slowing your heart rate down and being able to calm down in different situations. This is an example of a video. This is on Headspace. We won't watch it now, but it is in the resource links, and they have tons of different mindfulness videos. What I like is this one's only a minute long. So sitting. So it does not take too much time out of your day. But some people report like starting small with mindfulness and then working your way to longer practices can be a tool as well. So, we talked about creating space as a strategy for self care, creating space for yourself. And sometimes, in order to create that space, we also need to let go of things. One of the caregivers, when we were going through this slide, she's like, "This makes me think of the Serenity Prayer." And I think she's right on. So, if you've heard of that prayer, it says, "God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference." I think, especially with kinship care, there can be so many factors out of your control. And we as humans, we want to hold so tightly to them, and we want everything to go just as we planned, or we have certain expectations for situations and people. And it's a good thing to want to have a good outcome and want to control those things. But I think part of making space is your life is thinking about, okay, what are the things in my life that I want to focus on, that I do have control over, and what are some things that I can let go of? And maybe even feelings towards other people, that is something you can let go of too. So this could be a whole another presentation, but just challenging you to think that self-care isn't always doing something. It can also be letting go of different things in your life or different feelings in your life. So I love this quote: letting go can contain both endings and beginnings, and also space in between to exhale. However possible, keep creating breathing room. So, what in your life is something that you can let go of right now? And again, this could be a whole nother presentation, but we talked about letting go to create space, but also sometimes for our space, we need boundaries as well. So this is a short video about boundaries that I really like. And I like the visuals here of kind of keeping that fence around your yard. I know with so many different dynamics in the family, it can be really hard to set boundaries and keep boundaries, especially because your role has changed. It's not what it was before. So this gives some examples of different types of boundaries, and I just encourage you to think about it and maybe what are some boundaries that you could set or that would be helpful. So we'll watch this together.
Imagine you created a beautiful garden, but you notice people walking through the grass, littering, or even picking the flowers you've grown. So you put up a fence to mark what is your space, and you now decide who can come in through the gate. This is how we would protect our garden, and is also how we should protect ourselves by setting boundaries. Boundaries are limits we set for ourselves within relationships, be they romantic, professional, friends, or family. You want to clearly see where you end and someone else begins. I describe boundaries like a roadmap of me showing you how best to have a relationship with me. It is me clearly expressing and communicating my values and preferences because I want you in my life. Some examples of boundaries are physical boundaries, what you are comfortable with in terms of your own space and your own body. Emotional boundaries, what you are comfortable with sharing and what you would like to keep private. And time boundaries, how you would like to prioritize your own time and where you would like to take time to rest. An example of a request would be, please stop raising your voice. An example of a boundary would be, if you continue to raise your voice, I'm leaving. That would be me clearly expressing my thoughts and feelings, being aware of what I'm responsible for, and being aware that I need to explain my no. Boundaries are something that everyone can benefit implementing in their life because they not only protect our time and energy, they protect our relationships. They prevent miscommunication, misunderstandings, and built up resentment. But what about when someone doesn't respect the boundary? What's often difficult for people is what to do when somebody violates or oversteps a boundary. And if we use the earlier example that if somebody was to raise their voice at me, I am responsible for protecting myself. A lot of people fall into rescuing or fixing the other person, whereas that is up to me to protect myself. And if you continue to raise your voice at me, I leave. If you feel like you need support, please contact your local mental health services.
So when we create that space to check in with ourselves, remembering to we have to relearn and rediscover ourselves in this role. So especially relevant to kinship care because the day you become a caregiver, so much changes and people feel like they can lose themselves where they're just a caregiver and they can't be who they are, who they were before stepping into their role. And also when you're on survival mode, your brain is not functioning out of a space of creativity or curiosity. The stress can take over. So when we do have those moments of calm and to check in, really finding that as an opportunity of what do I like to do now? Who do I like to be with? What are ways that I can fill my own cup? And also how have I changed now? And maybe what I like now looks different from what I liked before. So creating that opportunity. And we must create a space to reconnect and relearn ourselves. Or sometimes that caregiver role again can take over. And I love what a caregiver shared during this training in our group. She said, the biggest thing I learned is when I'm a caregiver, that doesn't have to be everything. I can still be myself. There are still opportunities for me to be me and those little moments in my life. Or sometimes I can just bring along the child that I'm caring for, doing things for myself or doing things that I enjoy. This is a little bit of a nerdy side to me, but I'm sure some of you may have heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I think, especially for kinship care in the beginning, those bottom tiers can be like the biggest concern. So, meeting your own physiological needs and also the needs of the child in your care, including like water, rest, shelter, rearranging your house, figuring out how you'll make things work for everyone. But I think as a caregiver, it is important to move your way up this pyramid because needs also include your own need for belonging and love, and your own need for self actualization, which this means feeling like we've met our potential and we can be creative and do things that we enjoy and bring us fulfillment. Here are some questions that you can ask for rediscovering yourself. What's something new that I'd like to learn? What was something I enjoyed as a child? When or where do I feel most at peace? What energizes me? What's my favorite time of day? And an example of something that I do, I grew up on the beach in Connecticut, and I would go there when I was stressed. The sound of the ocean would always calm me down. So now I fall asleep listening to ocean waves every night, and that's something that's helped me. So, again, taking that time, you can come up with your own questions too, but think about at least one of these questions you can answer. And then also remembering that no one can do it alone. It does take a village. And there's that saying, like, every child needs a village, but every adult needs a village too, or a village as coming around that child. So I'll encourage you to just think about who can be in your village or who is in your village. And for the people that are, thinking about specific ways that people can support you, because sometimes they want to help, but they don't know how. So maybe it includes just like picking up something from the grocery store or a couple hours every month for someone to watch the children. So thinking about those specifics can be really helpful for you, but also for them. And just remembering that when they're helping, it's not always just for the child, it's also because they care about you too. So, really bringing in your village is important. And sometimes we might have to build our own village if we don't have a village around us now. And if this isn't family members or friends or peers, this can also include therapists or, reaching out to organizations who can provide different programs. So village can be built in a lot of different ways. I did want to play Yaya's video who talks about her village because I feel like it's a really powerful example of thinking about what has gotten her through in her caregiving role and what brings her strength.
They remember what Yaya did for them so they can be the best that they can be. Um, Honestly, I don't know where I'd be if I didn't have a support group because not everybody understands. In the beginning, it was always, my mom, my mom, my mom. Then I got involved in a support group called Kinship Caregivers Connect, and that support group really, really, really helped a lot because I met so many different other caregivers from different zip codes, and we just bonded as a family, and we don't feel alone because we do feel alone. We feel alone. Nobody understands our emotions and feelings. They think we're being negative, but we're not being negative. We're just as much as a human as the next person, just trying to do something that we wasn't prepared to do, that we wasn't ready to do, that we don't know how to do, but we're doing the best way we can. To be able to talk to someone that is going through the same thing where we can vent, cry, worship, and pray and understand each other helped a lot. And along the line, I did have to get therapy. I had to get a therapist to help manage my feelings and thoughts. So between the support from family, the support group, and the therapist, that's what keep me above. It keeps me from falling over the ledge, if that makes sense. Is what helps me continue doing what I do and taking.
So now we're going to go into some different examples of self care and strategies you can use. So, we talked about self care in a lot of different ways today, and just remembering that self care, it's not just eating an apple a day or going to the doctor's appointments. Well being can come from a lot of different angles. So, our spiritual well being, physical, mental, emotional, our heart, our soul, all of the things. And a lot of times, these strategies we'll talk about can actually overlap with different types of self care, but some different ways that you can make sure you're meeting your well being from all angles is thinking about all of these different ways that we can take care of ourselves physically, sensory. I did add this in with my OT background. Emotional, spiritual, professional, and personal. So we'll have some examples on here, but I really want you to think about it for yourself. First of all is physical self-care. So this can include just working in movement into our day, including going on walks. And sometimes walks can be helpful for our mental, our brain thinking through different things as well. Yoga could also be an example. It can be working in healthy foods when you can, or taking vitamins. And then also making sure you're making all of your appointments as well, and check, keeping your own health in check. We have sensory self care. This can include just things that make you feel calm. And if you do have the space, maybe even creating your own calming space or calming time. Sometimes a cup of coffee in the morning can help us to start our day. A weighted blanket can help with anxiety. There's also all different types of essential oils and diffusers for setting the tone at different times of the day. Sometimes it's feeling the sun on your face, getting outside. So there's so many different strategies, and even like simple as buying clothes that feel comfortable for us. There's also mental health self care, which a lot of the things that we talked about are impact our mental health in a positive way too. But sometimes this can even include seeing a counselor or a therapist, going to a support group, taking a deep breath, and just checking in on how we're feeling. Spiritual self care, this is what brings us fulfillment and hope. And it can be faith and religion. It doesn't have to be, but I know many people find hope in their faith and community there too. So this could be listening to gospel music, reading the Bible, going to the temple, making that a part of your routine. Or it can also just be admiring the nature and beauty of a sunset or the mountains. So there's lots of ways for us to check in with our spirit too. And prayer can be powerful too. Professional self care. This can be for those who do have a job, like being able to find a work life balance and setting boundaries with work. Working from home does make more possibilities with where you're able to work, but that can also present its challenges too. So just think about how your job is supporting your well being too. Volunteering can also bring fulfillment. I know y'all are doing a lot for your family already, but that is a way that people continue to stay involved and have that community as they get older. Personal self care, this is what makes you you. So everyone's slide will look different here. I want you to imagine what would be on your slide. I have my cousin here, my mom walking on the beach, the sunset. I love photography too. And of course, my cats, and they bring me a lot of enjoyment during the day. So thinking about what makes you you and how can you bring that back a little bit. Some examples of self care that we heard from caregivers in the group included diamond painting, paint by number, puzzles, crossword puzzles, word searches, coloring pages, just painting freely. Others talked about reading and listening to podcasts, and some even talked about gardening and growing fruits and vegetables in their yard. Others just talked about how much fulfillment their pets brought them. So these are just some other examples shared. And it's great that for everyone it is different, and that's what makes us unique. Thinking about how you can make things a family activity. Sometimes, it's really nice to do things on your own, but other times we can bring our kids in on stuff like doing yoga in the morning or taking them on walks or baking. And when you have a family activity, you can make it around something that you like as well. So it's a form of self care for you. And some of this can be even passing down, family recipes or songs that you used to listen to growing up. So letting the child get to learn about you in the process as well. And then if you do need more support, considering reaching out to a professional. Psychology Today has a really great website for finding a therapist and matching your insurance and what type of therapy you like, and you can put your zip code in as well. Knowing that there is a lot of different types of counseling and therapy, and doing your research to what type you might want for yourself. There's trauma counseling, there's family systems counseling, there's so many different types. And then realizing that even the provider finding the right fit is important. So it might not be the first person, but continuing to look until you find a good fit for yourself. As with most things, if we want to start doing something more regularly, working it into our routine can really help. So, this can be finding a time during your day, like in the morning when you read or before bed, or it could also be setting like a regular activity day. So, Fridays are family movie nights, or Wednesdays are the days that I go for a walk and do this. So, thinking about what your schedule is and what can fit into your routine, and even if you have a planner, like writing down in your planner these activities too. But I also think flexibility is key because things can change. So giving yourself grace and also starting small. So for me, I like have all these ideas of things I want to do, but I'm just going to choose one. So my one activity, since it's getting nice out, is going for a walk. And the way I'm going to work into my routine is when I have a lunch break between meetings, I'm going to just do one lap per day and see how that goes this week. And then next week, maybe I do 2 laps. Maybe that's too much and I just walk every other day, whatever it is. So, with a goal, setting a routine to that, but then knowing that it's also flexible. In this video, we'll hear from Tangi Taylor, who will talk about some ways that she integrates self care into her daily routine in life. And I think it's a really fun way. So, I encourage you to give the self care jar a try.
I think it's real important as we're on our journey. We need to take care of ourselves too. It's kind of like that old saying they say, you got to put the oxygen mask on if you're on the plane first before you can help somebody else. And that's self-care. And sometimes you just need to take a random thing and just do it. And it means something different from everybody. But anyway, I've got this little jar and it's got all kinds of different ideas that are self-care for me. And what I do is try to, at least once a week, get in here and get something out and make myself do that within that week. So we'll pull one out of here, and it's just random. We'll see what it says. Write in your journal. So it's just a different thing. Something to do, and like I said, it's real important to take time for yourself. Here's another one. Treat yourself to a bubble bath or a shower fizzy. So just make up things that you enjoy. Maybe that would be a pedicure, a manicure, writing in your journal, a piece of chocolate. Maybe it's exercise, maybe it's yoga, maybe it's meditation. Maybe it's read a chapter in a book. Maybe it's doing a faith-filled thing with a study, whatever it would be. But I mean, it's important that we take care of ourselves and try to eat right. Nana needs to keep working on that, but anyway, get a little exercise. It always makes you feel good, endorphins from exercise. But I was walking a lot and I quit since it's got cold outside, but I need to get back to that, and I know that. And that just kind of keeps you in check. So, got to keep up with these grandkids.
So, to wrap up, I want you to think for yourself, what is one thing, big or small? And nothing is small. That just means the time commitment. But what is something big or small that you can do for yourself this week? And I want you to write it down. I also want you to think, when can I do it this week? Write that down too. So, whether this is something you've been doing or something new that you want to try, so just one thing that you can do for yourself this week. And then think about afterwards, how did it make you feel? And to sum everything up, self care does not have to be expensive, planned, time consuming, decided by others, consistently out of reach, or a trip to the spa. Self care is never selfish, and each person decides what self care looks like to them. So you can decide what it looks like to you, and just starting realistic is really important. So we're going to end the presentation the way we started. What does self care mean to you? Or what does self care look like to you now after watching this presentation? Here are some resources. This will be found in the resource guide that goes along with this presentation. We have the Headspace YouTube channel. We have some different journaling prompts you can try. Morgan Harper Nichols, I use her affirmations so much, but they're so great. So checking out her podcast and YouTube page. Podcasts are great because there's something you can do in the car or on a walk. free adult coloring pages for those who like art. We also have a self-care hub on our Kinship Caregivers Connect website. So to wrap up, I do want to end with this poem just to recognize all that you've done for your family and maybe some of the feelings you've experienced going through this. But I do want to say thank you again so much for your time. I know it's precious, so I'm so honored that you decided to spend it here learning about self care. So it says, Kinship Caregivers, Unsung Heroes. Unsung heroes of sorts, yet the song has been sung quietly day by day. What must I do to make a child feel safe, to make a child feel loved? Must I give up my whole world and entire life? Well, that asks for a lot, but the cost isn't too much. Must I do it all without recognition? Must I navigate new territory and follow a new path that I never envisioned? Well, that asks for a lot, but the life of a child is more. Day by day, you have gone the extra mile to the moon and back times a million. You show that love in this life is truly chosen, and your love with each breath doesn't go unnoticed. You are maybe making ripples far farther than your lifetime can see. Heroes of your house and family, what more can one be? And the moral of this story is you do not have to give up your entire life, but you have done so much for the kids in your care. So I see you and I hear you. Thank you. Keep going. Don't hesitate to reach out if you have questions or interested in joining our group, which is open to anyone in Ohio. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you again.